Alright, so now we're moving on to 9.7, equations of circles. And the equation of a circle is usually put in standard form. And as you can see, instead of a squared plus b squared equals c squared, here you've got the coordinate x squared plus the coordinate y squared equals the radius squared. Okay, but that's okay if you are centered at the origin, and they, in the standard form, they use x and y as the origin. But what happens when it's moved away from it a little bit? So at some other point, and again, in normal circumstances, they call that h and k. Well, if you put all that into the distance formula, so you start off with the distance formula, don't forget x2 minus x1 squared, y2 minus y1 squared, and just substitute x1 and y1 for h and k, and you finish up with what is the standard formula for a circle. Alright, so let's have a look at using that standard formula with whatever you've been given. So obviously, as normal, they start off with the easier part. They give you the center of the circle and they give you the radius. All right, so here's the equation of the circle that you were already given, and the next line is just purely and simply substituting your x1, your y1, and whatever your radius is. So in this case, your x1 was 1, so x minus 1 squared. Your y was -8. Well, if you put that as y minus -8 becomes y plus 8, and 7 squared is 49. And that's as far as you need to go. Okay, so it's in standard form now. Keep your x's, keep your y's separate, and then all you need to do is square whatever your radius is, makes 49. Alright, so the difference between example 1 and example 2, this time you are told that the centre is at -2, 4, and it must go through a point -6, 7. The only thing that's not been given is the radius. So the first thing you have to do is use the distance formula in order to find the radius. So if you, there's your distance formula, if you then substitute in x1, y1 and x2, y2, eventually you will finish up with the fact that the radius is 5. Okay, then you always take the first point that's given on the question, which in this case is the -2, 4, and that becomes your x1 and y1. So there's x1, there's your y1, and there's your radius. And now you go back and do exactly as you did in the first example. So -2 becomes +2, +4 becomes -4, and 5 squared equals 25. So there is the equation and the answer to what they're asking you to do. Okay, so let's have a look at some of these questions that fit in with the examples they've got. But let's have a look at question number 1. You're told that the centre is 9, 0. You're told that the radius is 5. And you know that the equation is x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals whatever the radius squared is. So basically what we're looking at is x. 9 is positive, so we're going to do x minus 9 and square it, plus y minus 0 squared. Well, y minus 0 is just y, and if you square that you get y squared, and that will equal the radius squared. Well, 5 squared is 25. Okay, so that's the answer to question number 1. Alright, I'm going to skip to question number 4 now, because there we've got the same as question number 3, but we've got two different things. So let's have a look at what we've got with question number 4. We've got -5, 3, and we've got 1, -4. Okay, so don't forget this is 1 and this is 2, because we have to use that. So if we use Pythagoras, or the distance formula I should say, so we've got 1 minus -5 is the same as 1 add 5 and square it. And then we're going to add on to that the -4 minus 3 and square it. Okay, so once we've done all that, you finish up with 36, because 6 squared is 36, plus -4 minus 3 is -7, but if you square it you get +49, and you finish up with root 85. Okay, now at this point here you can actually solve it, and you finish up, and if you do solve that you get 9.21, but this point is not needed at the moment, and you'll see very quickly. Alright, so we need to go back to the -5, 3, and we need to do the radius, which is the 9.21, but you'll see in a minute something slightly different. Okay, let's put that under what we answered for question number 1, the same thing. So x minus whatever h is, which in this case is -5, so we've got x plus 5, and we need to square that, and we're going to add on to that y minus k. Well, y minus k, which is 3, is positive, so that's going to be y minus 3 and squared it. And 9.21 squared is going back to our 85 again. That's why I'm saying you don't really need to do the 9 to square root it, because you're going to use that anyway. So that's 85. Okay, so this is the answer to question number 4. X plus 5 squared plus y minus 3 squared. So let's have a look at example 3. Now we've got something slightly different. As you can see from what they've given you, that you've got the x squared and y squared, but you've now got an extra part as well as your radius. Okay, so the first thing you've got to do is write it out as it is. So x squared plus y squared minus 8 squared plus 2y squared equals -8. All right, and then rearrange it so that you've got everything together, because what you're going to do then is you're going to separate out the x part to the y part, and then obviously keep the radius separate. All right, once you've separated the x's and the y's, you would see that you've got x squared minus 8x. Well, the first thing you have to do is complete the square. So we're going back to algebra 1 now. So remember what the completing the square, and I'll show you an example in a minute before we go on to questions. You halve that number and square it. So half of -8 is -4, and -4 is 16, and that will square the x's. And then you factor x squared minus 8x plus 16, and then it's just basically whatever you halve this becomes whatever it is inside your parentheses, and then we will solve for that in a minute. Okay, the same now with the x's. Half of 2 is 1, 1 squared is 1. All right, and then what you have to do is whatever you've added to your x's and your y's to complete the square, which in this case is the 16 and the 1, you must add to the radius. Okay, and then when you finish that, you've simplified and factored both sides. You get x minus 4 squared plus y plus 1 squared, and -8 plus 16 plus 1 will give you 9. And if you square root 9, you get the 3 squared. So now you've actually got it in its standard format. Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm going to put on the next sheet, before we do the questions, how to complete the square. All right, so let's have a look at how we complete the square. Okay, so completing the square. We're back to algebra 1 again, as I said. But you take your equation, so let's just say, for instance, you've got x squared plus, let's say, 6x. All right, simplest way, follow it through. You divide that by 2, which will give you 3. You're ignoring the variable at the moment. From that point there, you actually square it. Okay, so I'm going to put n squared here. So 3 squared will give you 9, and that's plus 9. Okay, so now instead of x squared plus 6x, we've now got x squared plus 6x plus 9. And then what you do is factor this line here. Okay, so remember you have 2 parentheses. X squared, you put an x in both parentheses. This guy is positive, and so is this, so you're going to add. All right, and then a number multiplied together, 2 numbers multiplied together make 9, and the same 2 numbers when added together will make 6. Well, that will give us our 3 and 3, and we can simplify that as x plus 3 squared. Okay, so that is completing the square. But remember what I said to you, whatever you do to this, so in this case we've added 9. If we had a radius over here, let's just say the radius equaled 5, then what we've got to do is add that to that as well. Okay, so don't forget you've got to move it across. So if you've added something to the left hand side, you must do the same to the right. So let's have a look at number 3. All right, and the one good thing about this is they've already put it in position for you. So they've separated your x coordinates, they've separated your y's, and separated your radius. All right, same thing again. So let's go back to what we said about completing the square. So x squared minus 6x. All right, completing the square. Remember what I said? Halve this number and square it. So we're going to finish up with x squared minus 6x plus 9. All right, and if we factor that, remember what I said a few minutes ago, we've got 2 parentheses, x in both. This is positive, but this is negative, and the only way you can get that is by 2 negatives. And we know that 3 times 3 makes 9, and 3 add 3 will make 6. And we can simplify that as to x minus 3 and squared. All right, let's do the same with the y's. So now we've got y squared plus 4y. Okay, halve it and square it, so it's going to be y squared. Half of 4 is going to be 2, and 2 squared is going to give us 4. All right, and if we factor that, you're going to finish down with y, and both of these are positive, so it's going to be y plus 2, which will give us y plus 2 and square it. Okay, and then don't forget, the one thing we've got to remember is we started off with 3, but we've added 9 and we've added 4. So on that side, on the radius side, so r equals 3, remember? What we've got to do now is 3 plus 9 plus 4, which will give us 16. And don't forget we have to square root 16, which will give us 4. All right, so now we've got what we need, okay? Now remember what we've got. First of all, we've got to work out what x1 is. And x1 is always the opposite of this, so it's going to be x plus 3. So x is going to equal 3, not plus, just a minute. So x is going to equal 3. Okay, the y coordinate is the opposite of that, is going to equal negative 2. And we know the radius is still at 4. Okay, so now what we've got to do is we've got to plot that and then work it out. So let's go to the next page on that. So let's carry on with our question number 3. Don't forget we had x minus 3, so we've got 3, so our coordinate is 3, negative 2, and our radius is equal to 4, and you've got to plot that, remember? So if we go across 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and we're going to go down to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and up 1, 2. Okay, so 3, negative 2 will be here, so that's the center, and our radius needs to be 4. Okay, so we need to go 4 to the left, 4 to the right, 4 up, and 4 down. So we are going to this point here and 4 across. 1, 2, 3, 4. So we're going to go over here, and we go 1, 2, 3, 4. We're going to go over here, and we're going to go down 4. So we're going to be here somewhere. So basically our circle is going to look like that. Okay, well obviously you need to be using graph paper for this, but that's how you then solve and plot for question number 3. So let's have a look at example 4, putting into practice what we've just learnt. We've been given 3 points, A, B and C, and as it tells you to start off with, you want to find the centre first. That's what the basically example 4 is after. First and foremost, if you can, construct it, draw it, so at least you can see where it is. And then what you've got to do is construct perpendicular bisectors of 2 sides to locate the centre. Well, if you look at BC, that is horizontal, so obviously it's a vertical line. So really whatever is the center of that line is where it's going to be anyway. But just to clarify and to make sure, bisect AB and make it a perpendicular bisector, and as you can see it does meet at this particular point. All right, well, if it's like that and you can see it definitely off the graph, then it says here that it seems to be -4,3. Well, that's okay. And then all you've got to do is put it in and work out what the radius is. Well, the radius from this point to this point is 4 units. So now you've got the radius as well, and then you just plug it in. Okay, so let's have a look at question number 9. You've been given 3 points, R, S and T, and then what it's asking for, it says, even though it says determine the location of another tower equidistant, what that means is that needs to be in the center, so that's the center of your circle. So basically if you plot it and you plot your points, you should have R over here somewhere, S will come down here, and T is over here. And the good thing about this one is you've got a horizontal line here. Well, this point here is at -4, the x coordinate, and this one over here is at 8. So you've got a total distance of 12. So you know you're going to be around about 6. Okay, so 6 away from 8, or 6 plus 4. So your perpendicular bisector is going to be on the point where x equals 2. So you've got your x coordinate. All right, and then what you've got to do is your y coordinate. Well, if you then bisect this side here, you're coming down here, and your actual coordinate is 2, -1. So now you've got the coordinate of your center. Now you've obviously then got to pass it back to what you did with examples in example 3. So let's have a look at what happens when we move over with those coordinates that we've been given. All right, so carrying on, we now know that we've got the coordinate at 2, -1. All right, so first of all, what we've got to do now is come up with whatever the radius is. Well, I'm just going to use S, which is 8, 1. And the first thing I'm going to do is put that into the distance formula. And you will have 1 plus 1 and squared. Y1 minus -1 is y plus 1 plus 8 minus 2 squared. So you're going to finish up with 2 squared plus 6 squared, which is going to give you the square root of 40. And don't forget, that's the radius, and I did say to you, don't bother doing it because you're going to have to multiply it up again anyway. So, and we're using 2, 1 as our center coordinate, so it's going to be, and x is, the 2 coordinate is positive, so it's going to be x minus 2 squared plus the y coordinate is negative, so it's going to be y plus 2, no, y plus 1, sorry. Let me just erase that a minute. Okay, so y plus 1 and squared it, and radius squared, well, the square is 40. Okay, so that is what you need to do to get the answer to question number 9.